So let me introduce you to our esteemed speakers for today's e-conference. Next slide. Mr. Sohab Rice, Chief Operating Officer, Indian Chemical Business, Tata Chemicals Limited. Mr. Sohab Rice oversees the efficient operation, development, and growth of the Indian chemical business in India. He has over 33 years of experience in diverse fields, ranging from chemicals, manufacturing, power plant operations, and appliances. He began his career with Godrej Appliances in 1984 before moving to Tata Chemicals in 2000. Mr. Rupak Saraswat, CEO India Glycols Limited. He has over 27 years of experience in the specialty chemicals domain, working in various roles in business management, supply chain, and operations etc. He was managing director of Transpec Silox Industries, which is now known as Silox, and it is part of the Silox group of Belgium. He also worked with Croda as managing director Croda India and managing director regional operations Asia. Mr. Home Hisaria, he is the senior vice president Reliance Industries Limited, joined Indian Trade Service in 1992 as a Group A officer. In a tenure of 17 years, worked with government in various capacities in Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of Agriculture. Last position was Director Joint DGFT in Ministry of Commerce. Working since November 2009 as Senior Executive Vice President, Reliance Industries, heading the indirect taxation, trade policy, and international business compliance. Sorry. Mr. Deepak Shah, CMD Sulphur Mills Limited. He is the CMD of Sulphur Mills Limited Group. He pioneered in introducing sulfur WG formulations and creating global capacities in sulfur WDG. He had an unwavering faith in sulfur molecule to transform Indian agriculture by way of boosting nutrient use, efficiency, and in enhancing agriculture productivity. It is for this pioneering work, he is also called the Sulphur Man of India, and he is also presently the chairman of Crop Care Federation of India. Mr. Pankaj Mehta, Joint President, Corporate Relations and Strategy, Aarti Industries Limited. He is engaged in strategy development for the chemicals business at Aarti Industries Limited, which encompasses business development, corporate planning, and policy advocacy. Prior to Aarti, Pankaj spent nearly 21 years at Reliance Industries. He has also worked for 15 years in the US at the DuPont company in the specialty polymers division. Mr. Kausal Soparkar, Managing Director of Meghmani Fine Chem Limited. He has played a pivotal role in successfully commissioning the chlor-alkali complex at GIDC Dahej. Under his stewardship, new projects, production, marketing, finance, infrastructure development, and information technology are given priority. Safety concepts are updated to an international quality level. Today, under him, Meghmani Group is not only standing tall among stiff competition, but also raising the bar and setting tough targets to establish giants. Mr. Ankit Patel, Executive Director, Bodil Chemicals Limited. He was supposed to join, but due to some emergency, he is not joining today. He is the promoter and Executive Director of Bodil Chemicals Limited, and he has been the Bodil board for 13 years, Bachelor of Economics and MBA Finance from USA. Ms. Priyambada Vumkar, Managing Director, Saujanya Color Private Limited. She is the Managing Director of Saujanya Color, a manufacturing company based out of Navi Mumbai. Promoter of Saujanya Color for 37 years, the company is counted among leading producers of chlorins, which are liquid colors used to impart color in different products such as paints, inks, flooring, cement and plastics, cement and plasters, plastics, personal care products, and cosmetics. Mr. Amit Gandhi, Managing Director, Partners, Boston Consulting Group. He leads Boston Consulting Group in chemicals and agribusiness for India, as well as the firm's work in strategy and value acceleration for the Asia Pacific region. He is a core member of the industrial goods practice with extensive experience in chemical, agribusiness, automotive, and steel industries. He has led several engagements on growth strategy, sales and marketing organization redesign, operational efficiency, and transformation. Next slide. The key discussion points, we have changed the key discussion points on the basis of the budget announcement made yesterday by Nirmala Sitharamanji. And we are focusing on review of custom exemptions and tariff simplification, custom duty reduction, promoting blending of fuel, chemical-free natural farming and Kisan drones, incentives to newly incorporated manufacturing entity, government contribution in R&D, battery swapping policy, energy transition and climate change, transition to carbon neutral economy, customs national portal to focus on facilitation, capex investment of rupees 10.68 lakh crores, focus on green initiatives and sustainability, and provisions of MSME in chemical sector. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the chemical industry outlook, this is the only print version that we do have. Otherwise, all our digital version. This is the second edition of the chemical industry outlook, an exclusive collection for premium content for CXOs in chemicals, petrochemicals, and energy sector. And the theme of this year edition is Making India a Global Manufacturing Hub. The compendium will have industry captain's perspective, interviews from leaders in government, industry, academia, association, and R&D organization. 3 trends is on green chemistry, sustainability, digitalization, technology, safety and security, supply chain, and logistics. On behalf of Indian Chemical News, I would like you to invite you to participate and ensure your organization presence in this exclusive collector's edition. With this brief presentation, let me start the panel discussion. And I request the delegates to keep posting their questions in the Q&A window and not in the chat window during the course of the e-conference. We will take Q&A at the end of the panel discussion, and the last 15 minutes would be reserved for Q&A. We will have 2 rounds. In the first round, I will ask all delegates to give their views on Union Budget 2022-23. And in the second round, I will ask specific questions to all my panelists on the sector which they represent. I hope that's okay with you. So with this, now I will request Mr. Rupak Saraswat to give his views on the budget. And I would request everybody so to be precise, and we will have 4 to 5 minutes from each panelist for both the sessions. So over to Mr. Rupak Saraswat.
I said thank you, Praveen, and a very good afternoon to the rich panelists that we have, rich in terms of their experience and what they bring to the table. I hope to hear from them and take their views as well. As you said, this budget, there was a lot of talk about this being one, a short budget. Second, this being a talk about a 25-year budget. So I am a little more optimistic. There are always some concerns, but I do see this budget more as directional and not as transactional. And in that directional budget, what is it that lies for industry and what is it that possibly lies for the chemical industry is what I'm going to talk about. So we came after about 2 years of disruption, and I think now we are moving ahead, we are recollecting, we are focusing back on building India and the economy, which I think is right for India. And this budget provides a steady direction, which of course has challenges, but it also provides a direction for our opportunities. I would have liked the budget and the Indian government to give chemical industry a little more importance than it has, with much more focus. And the reason I say so is because it is fundamental to what this government wants to do for India, what any government would like to do for India. It's fundamental to the sectors that we want to grow, be it construction, be it defense, be it so many other, pharma, healthcare, crop care, and so on. So it's fundamental. Secondly, it is fundamental to the transition that we want to the green economy. It's fundamental to what we want to do with energy security. And more so, people have not talked about it enough as to what opportunities and challenges the circular economy brings for us. And therefore, we need to create a system of innovation, an ecosystem. And I think whilst the focus has not been there specifically in terms of the chemical industry, but I'm not disappointed, and I'll tell you why. It is heartening to see a capex spend increase of 35%. It was very easy to do a revenue spend and be populist, but I think it is the capex spend in terms of building infrastructure, defense, railways, ports, which is fundamental to laying a foundation to growing the industry, which is also the chemical industry. And as you see, as has happened in the world, whether it is Korea, whether it is China, their growth was always followed by addressing the issues of infrastructure. I think there is a clear Make in India focus which has been sustained. The world is the talk of China plus one is not rhetoric, it's a real discussion in the world. It is up to us as to how we make a great opportunity from it. I often wonder, we have all the characteristics of being much better than what Jurong Island is. And I was responsible for Kroda's site in Jurong Island as well. And why we are not able to get there. I will come to that later. So the Make in India focus in across areas is bound to create opportunities for the chemical industry. I think the maximum time ever spent in a budget this time was on climate risk and green energy, ever. And it is a lot of time was spent on in short budget. Two things that the industry needs to understand. First of all, the risk is real. And as the finance minister said, this is the biggest external risk that we face. And I think this creates tremendous opportunities for the chemical industry to innovate and deliver sustainable molecules and sustainable models. It applies to what we are going to do in terms of renewables and what we are going to do in terms of energy security. Many people here may know or may not know, and I consider this as one of the biggest news that India may like to celebrate. In 2015, India had pledged that we would have 40% of our energy requirements coming from renewables. It's very heartening to see that we actually met that target this year 9 years ahead of schedule. So 160 gigawatt of energy out of 390 gigawatts of energy is actually coming from solar, hydel and wind. And India has a plan to do something like 530 by 2030. I'll tell you what implication it has for the chemical sector. So there's a lot of talk about, not talk, real action now starting to happen on green energy, biofuels, solar. And when we have a lot of green energy, we can create a lot of green hydrogen. And similarly, from the cellulosics, we can create ethanol. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to build on these feedstocks, to create a whole host of innovative new chemicals. I think that's a great opportunity for the chemical industry. The thing for the industry to do is to see that we do not end up selling iron ore when we should be selling steel. India has been selling iron ore, but Japan sells steel. And I think the other thing that you talked about, often we do not discuss, is the tremendous push on technology. For example, digitization. We think it doesn't affect us. I think it affects us tremendously. It's caused tremendous disruption, and it has caused tremendous empowerment of people. I was reading about digital payments, and just listen to these numbers. In 2013-14, India used to do 15 crore transactions digitally. Now India does 370 crore transactions digitally. Now compare this with China, which has moved up from 55 crores to 280 crore transactions digitally. So we were 1/4 of China in terms of digital transactions. Now we are 2 times of China in terms of digital transactions. We were 3 times the number in terms of US in terms of digital transactions. Now we are 15 times the number in terms of digital transactions. Now also imagine if this COVID would have struck us 7 years ago, it would have been very, very difficult for us to go. Remember how much the digital technology enabled, right from school to running our offices to running our factories. Now it's not only about this. What we are not seeing is the potential and the disruption this can cause and the opportunities it can create even within our industry. So there has been a talk about leveraging technology in terms of drones, digital currency, digital learning. And I think that it's for us to see what's happening in that space and make that opportunity count. Ease of doing business continues to be a focus. Progress has been slow, but I think it is real. The real message for me, for the chemical industry or others, look, going forward, a few things are going to be very important. It is going to be a great time going forward to build businesses which are ethical, which are compliant. Ease of doing business also means a lot of pressure on this. And more importantly, can we create businesses from 30 years ago when we set up karkhanas because we had the lagat and the license, which is money and the license, which was a specialty and people were commodity. I think talent and innovation and people is a new specialty, capital is commodity. People who understand that, and that's because of a whole host of ecosystem changing, including digital empowerment that's happening, are going to create great companies going for the future, and we must create great partnerships and build a great ecosystem. I'm a great believer that it's not companies which win. If you look around the world, it is ecosystems which win. And I think that is where we can play a role. And I didn't go into the specifics, I think, in terms of duty and all of that. And I said my commentary was more on, I see it as a directional and not a transactional budget, and that's very heartening. And it's not a whole host of very exciting announcements, but I think good for India building up, and we look forward to how the chemical industry fits in. So those are my quick initial comments, Prashant.
Thank you, sir, for your initial comments, and the word which you have used, directional versus transactional, is very catchy. Now I would request Sohab Rahesji, if you can give your thoughts on your initial comments on budget.
Thank you, Prashant, for this opportunity, and good afternoon to everyone on this call and in this webinar. At the outset, I can say that the government through this budget is actually laying down the roadmap for a much longer period than this being a mere budget for next year, 2022-23. Though it's a part of the budget, but it's more than annual budget. I agree with my friend what he said earlier. We can see government promoting technology-enabled development, energy transition, climate action, and infrastructure development, in addition to increasing consumption and supporting the domestic capacity additions. In line with the larger global commitment that India has made for tackling climate change, the government is pushing and has pushed on the growth of grid-connected energy storage and provides for boosting domestic manufacturing of solar power equipment and batteries through a 19,500 crore PLI scheme, which they have announced for PV modules. And they have also announced green bonds to mobilize resources for this infrastructure. The solar panels will generate demand for many chemicals like silicon adhesives, solvent coatings, coating films in the panel assembly itself. And also in addition to that, it will generate demand for soda ash in the solar glass manufacturing. So apart from energy transition, it also provides opportunities for many chemicals and so many other sectors within that. The budget supports enhancing domestic value addition. It has announced reduction of customs duty on certain chemicals like methanol, acetic acid, heavy feedstocks for petroleum refining, etc. While it has also announced raising customs duty on sodium cyanide, for which India has already enough domestic capacity. So it's trying to balance out and support manufacturing sectors, where it will reduce cost on manufacturing on some of the critical products. And at the same time, it will support market for some other critical products where we have enough capacity. The PM Gati Shakti, and specifically within Gati Shakti, the focus on linking rivers will create waterways. If you look at it, it's a large geography. And at various, from one part of the country to other part of the country, if you have to move, if you have to use roads or railways, or if you have to use the outer circle of vessels, it's cost ineffective. So waterways, as it starts building waterways, internal waterways, if you look at the formulation of the master plan, which they have announced for expressways targeting 25,000 kilometers national highway in the next year, and the investment in 4 multimodal logistics park through PPP in the next year. So all this put together will support logistics cost coming down to a large extent for logistics intensive geography which we have. This, if you look at in line with the proposed unified logistics interface platform which they have announced, this will help overall improve our efficiency and reduce cost, and will also help us in being competitive in both domestic and global markets. Apart from this, there are many proposal processes and systems that are getting simplified for continuous journey towards our ease of doing business, which we have started a few years back. We have traveled some journey, and I think continued focus on these things will help improve industrial efficiency for all the sectors. The extension of tax rates, concessional tax rates for new capacities, which was there till 23, now it has been moved to 24, March 24. This will help us boost investments further in all the sectors. So we still have about 2 additional years available. We are say, even if we are saying that we are in March 22 to March 24, so about 26 months we have from today. So a lot of new capacities can come with this concessional tax rates that will boost our manufacturing and also capacity enhancements across sectors. While we do this, it will be important to focus and ensure that we are looking at potential for new age technologies and the products that are coming out with different schemes and different roadmaps that the government has already announced, and that where the world is going through. Finally, the proposed direct payment of 2.37 trillion rupees towards MSP. The focus on the agricultural and rural areas will support next year's projected growth of 8 to 8.5%, which is a significantly good growth rate, which all of us could be actually looking at. And this provides us with an opportunity for various demands for whether it is chemicals, petrochemical products specific to our industries. It will definitely, because we are in the basic chemicals, it goes into all the applications, various consumer products, various agricultural products. So it augurs well for all of us. So I think all in all, it's a very positive step, and we can look forward to an exciting year ahead. Thanks, Prashant. That's all from the initial comments.
Thank you, sir. Now I come to Mr. Home Isaria from Reliance Industries Limited. Sir, your take on union budget?
Thank you, Praveen, for giving this opportunity. My co-panelists and the participants on the call. While I agree, and we can go on to the long-term direction of the budget, but I would focus on 4 things which are medium-term to short-term, and it gives relief and gives assurance to chemical and petrochemical industry. The first thing, we are all aware, the industry is planning more than 8 lakh crore worth of investments, fresh investments, in the coming 3 to 5 years. The budget does not change any of the underlying assumptions with which the industry conceived these projects. So no changes in indirect tax rates, no changes in direct tax rates. So they become, they give you kind of assurance that, look, the policies are here to stay. They are long-term, and you can plan. You can plan long-term for the investments which are huge. That was my first observation. The first feeling from this budget. The second thing I would say, the various expenditure which are proposed to be done in social sector as well as on infrastructure, they augur well for polymer and chemical industry. Let's just take the case of Nal Se Jal scheme, the water supply at homes. The expenditure on that is going to be 60,000 crore rupees budgeted estimate, budgeted fund for this scheme. And this scheme is, the expenditure on this scheme is highly plastic intensive. The PVC pipes, the other fittings. Similarly, the 40,000 crore rupees which have been provided for housing for all. Again, this will be a very highly plastic polymer intense expenditure. So the budget, while providing for development of infrastructure, provides for increasing demand, inbuilt demand for the plastic, polymer and chemical sector in the coming year. The third point which I would like to I would like to repeat, that ease of doing business that remains for last 7 years continuously. In each of the budgets, the finance minister has dwelled upon this ease of doing business. And we all can feel, especially since I look after compliances, we all can feel how these measures which have been taken for easing compliances have made our life easier. We are very eagerly looking forward to the green clearance initiative, which the FM has promised, that environmental clearance new module that they are going to develop, the new system they are going to develop, because in chemical and petrochemical industry, environmental clearance remains a big part of compliance, not just for starting our business, but continuing with our business. And lastly, one big announcement I would say of the budget is the revamp of SEZ Act. We have huge unutilized land and industrial infrastructure in SEZ, which is not being utilized because of some of the rigidities where the SEZs find it really difficult to access the domestic market. They are going to be promoted more as industrial parks with some amount of course, as the Commerce Minister said in his interview yesterday, with some amount of level playing field that the people who have obtained or availed the exemption benefits earlier, they are put under some kind of a restriction or kind of a payback, which is commensurate to the benefit that they have taken. Otherwise, this SEZ scheme being opened up for the industrial development in the country. So these four are the biggest takeaway that I choose from the budget 22-23. That's all I had to say in limited.
One supplementary questions to you, sir. So you are optimistic that India will get that investment of 8 lakh crore by 2025 as envisaged for the chemical and petrochemical sector?
I don't see any reason in this budget that why should any entrepreneur change his plan otherwise. There is no disincentive for anyone to change his plan and go back that, okay, I need to go back to my drawing board again. So that is the way I look at it.
Very beautifully put, sir. And all those 4 points are interconnected to each other. And the best part is that the kind of investment and the kind of land parcel that you are looking, that is your company is looking in Kutch, is itself shows that India will have that investment going forward. Thank you, sir. Now I request Deepak Shahji. He represents Sulphur Mills and he also represents CCFI. So your views, sir, on the budget?
Thank you, Prashantji. Thank you for inviting, first of all. And good evening to all the respected participants and the viewers. Some of the points may have been already covered or spoken by my co-panelist Shoaib or even Mr. Hisaria. However, I definitely feel that it's a very fairly well-balanced, growth-oriented, and this budget has a very, very long-term vision. And I personally is of the opinion that this budget is a very sustainable budget and now it's my personal opinion that you will always continue minimum 8% plus GDP all throughout, maybe for next 10 years. And that's what is really, really required for country to grow. The second best thing that I feel was the capex enhancement, the 7.5 lakh crores or whatever, which is almost 35% increase. And this is going to really generate a lot of private investments, lot of employment, and the economy should do much better. It's a great stimulus. The third thing I would say, which is also slightly covered, ease of doing business 2.0. And what the finance minister called it Amrit Kal, Amrit Kal. Something she said Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav or something, which is a good, I think what she's indicating is a good thing. Similarly, one thing I got very impressed myself, as you know, I'm a little bit going into my own field, agriculture, but Indian agriculture played a very significant role during the pandemic. And all of you know there was hardly any shortage of food or anything. I mean, it was almost life as normal as far as the food was concerned. So I got impressed one thing by river interlinking, which somebody already covered, but want to say that 44,000 plus crores of investment involving all the major rivers from northeast Brahmaputra to west Tapi and Narmada and Krishna and Godavari in south. This will irrigate 1 crore hectares of additional land and will generate power, provide drinking water. And what has not been covered by them is, I feel this water, when it flows through so many places, is going to raise our water level up. And many farmers, rural citizens, etc. I mean, rural citizens will get employment and so on. So I personally feel this is a great point. There are other points which are like Prashantji, you said you will take up the subject wise. So I will cover then. But like SEZ Act is being replaced, I assume that the government is thinking to use up the lands, the manufacturing capacity is installed, and that can be used. It could not be used for domestic use much, so it can be used for domestic use. And all industries, I'm not saying chemical, all industries, including chemical industries, is likely to benefit. Again, another point, 2.37 lakh crores of direct payment to 1.63 crores farmers is a great step in the right direction. With this, Prashantji, I will end up here, and you can now take over.
So thank you, sir, for your initial comments. Now, I would request Mr. Pankaj Mehta from Aarti Industries to give his views.
Thank you, Praveen, for this opportunity to join with my fellow panelists and to discuss the budget that came out yesterday and also the participants here. I think many of the comments will overlap with the earlier comments by the panelists, but I hope to bring out little different nuances and the impact that this will have. I think overall it's a good budget. If you look at the macroeconomics, the government had a choice of whether to focus on growth or by priming the pump, or on the inflation and tighten up the funding so that the fiscal deficit comes below the 3% target. And of course, I'm glad that the government chose growth. So that's what we need to do. And we have to really outgrow the inflation, by growing so quickly that the economy grows faster than inflation. So I think that's the right choice and very good for the industry. Like Rupert said, that while the overall budget is good, growth promoting, but the chemical industry was not paid as much attention. But I think some of the things are very supportive in a sense of the market priming, it was mentioned that there will be a higher capital investment of 7.05 lakh crores, 35% increase. Of course, the key will be efficient implementation of this. Many times there's a slip between the cup and the lip. And while we may have allocations, we may not be meeting those targets or not meeting them efficiently to make the impact desired. Front loading it for the year would also help, so that right now, when we are just coming out of the third wave of the COVID, we'll see the difference. We'll see a quicker difference. Housing for all with 44,000 crores to put up 80 lakh homes is another thing. While this improves the general economy, of course, a lot of this capital investment goes into things like housing, railway coaches, defense spending, road, etc., that are consumers of plastics, as Om said, and also chemicals. So in that sense, the general economy increase, chemicals go into pretty much every field. So it does bode well for the chemical industry. In While that is true, I mentioned about the inflation concern. So there are initiatives on asset monetization by selling some PSUs. Hopefully that will help to reduce the deficit and help the macroeconomics in that way. Overall, besides that, the tech-enabled development, digital economy, climate action, energy transition, that's the overall picture. The infrastructure, actually, we have been representing to the government for a long time that the logistics costs in India are very high and we need better infrastructure. So the Gati Shakti program with railways coming up with 400 trains and more tracks, 25,000 kilometers of roads, 100 railway logistics hubs, and the waterways that we heard, all those put together will enhance our logistics infrastructure, and will no longer be that shipping from China or Singapore to India is less expensive than from the west coast to the east coast. So I think that will also is a step in the right direction, which the industry has been asking. We heard about the few key raw material feedstock kind of chemicals, methanol and acetic acid, having reduced duty, and product downstream product sodium cyanide increased duty. But I hope that is just the beginning. We've been representing that the concept of reducing feedstock duties and increasing towards the intermediates and finished goods. That was also stated by the finance minister, and that is now accepted. So hopefully down the line, not just waiting for the next annual budgets, but even in between, they'll have duty adjustments to make that better, so that Make in India becomes really very, very attractive. Someone also mentioned about the extension of the 15% tax on new manufacturing startups. That should also encourage by a year. That should also encourage new manufacturing. The stability of the policies, tax rates, like Om mentioned, is supportive of stability in plans that we have. He also mentioned about the SEZ framework, which is going to be revisited, and I hope that also impacts the PCPIRs, which have been kind of on the anvil for a too long a time. And like Jurong and other places, we finally get up to it with policy support there. I think the a couple of negatives that I see is that no PLI for our industry, which we were hoping will support the huge 8 lakh crore kind of investments that are being planned. Only PV solar power related equipment was the additional PLI industry covered under PLI. So that was one that we were hoping for. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And the concessional duty on import of capital goods, now it's at 7.5% duty, which is a little disappointing, because most of the chemical industry doesn't import goods if they are available in India. It's only when it's really necessary or some proprietary specific specialty equipment. And so that will increase the outlay for capital investment. So I think overall, I think it's a good forward-looking budget that is focused on growth and reflects the sentiments, of the industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Pankaj. Now I would request Kaushal Soparkar ji, if you can give your views on union budget.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to all the panelists. Good afternoon to all the people who are attending the conference. It's a great when you are middle of in between all the panelists, so they cover everything, and you just have to talk a little bit. And I'm very thankful that most of the panelists before me have covered everything in such a nice manner, so I can just do a little bit of topping here. But yes, overall, if you look at as a total scheme as a budget, One thing I will tell you that when we go through any successful nation's history, you will find that the budget or the spending has to be a long term. Cannot be just look at 12 months, or cannot be just driven by election driven or something like that, right? So if you look at from that perspective, this budget is not about today, it's about the next generation, or about our future. Because as we all know that India is going to be one of the, or rather it's already youngest populated country in the world. Demand is going to increase, and the per capita income is growing day by day. And for that kind of nation, what is requirement is the core infrastructure that has been missing all these years. And that we all know as a industrial leaders, we all know that we are able to do everything within our industrial land or plot or premises, to all kind of capex for our plant or for our people. But what about when you step out? Sometimes we don't see the good roads, or power infrastructure is missing, the housing is not there. That's why we set up the colonies for our people. And that's what the government is trying to do now by creating a house for everyone, from Nal Se Jal, that kind of things. And this kind of schemes will push ultimately the consumption towards the basic chemicals to the specialty chemicals and everything. And that will bring money in terms of investments. And if you look at the 7-year history of this government, for 2014 to 2021, they've announced various schemes like Make in India, to start up India. And now government is trying to connect all the dots to make sure that people produce here for India, be it any sector, be it chemical, be it renewable energy sector, be it defense. And that's how the job creation can happen. So if you look at in yesterday's budget scheme, they are creating over 25,000 kilometer road network that will bring a huge push to industry which are connected to the road industry. PM Gati Shakti, which we all have talked about. If that happens in next whatever span, maybe 3, 4, 5, 7 years, but that will be a big boost to our industry. We know that logistics is the biggest cost, and that's where India is failing to meet the global capacities, or to global standards. So that's one aspect. It's very positive. Spending on defense, India is a huge defense bill. Now, if that is reduced, then tomorrow that money can be given to other industry, and probably the wish list of chemical sector is not been there in PLI, which can happen in future if the government saves some money from somewhere. Linking rivers is again the biggest thing. I mean, how the waterways are working in China, we all know, or maybe in European countries. So that is a lagging part. If that happens, again, that will push rather investment in the next direction. The drone spray for agrochemicals is also very welcoming thought process. And battery swapping and PLI scheme for a solar capacity was a very welcoming move. And we hope that this momentum will sustain in coming budgets. Then and only then this thing will materialize. Because it's as I said in the beginning of my speech, it's not about today, it's about tomorrow. So this momentum should remain. And we as industrialists should just committed towards our investment. And let's hope for the best for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaushalji. We have a lone lady speaker. I would request her to give her views. Priyambada Bhumkar. Madam, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone, to my co-panelists as well as to all the participants. A lot has been covered by everyone almost so far, but really the things which pop out for me from within the budget are as follows. I agree with the earlier panelists that this is indeed a budget which has its sights set very far and very forward into a distant future. India at 100. From India at 75. So this lays out a roadmap for that. And the key features of this budget, which actually popped out for me when I heard it, are Of course, the very big focus on the infrastructure development, which is supposed to connect all over India, make it very easy for businesses, for industry, for people, for transport, for everything. I think a very big focus has been laid on this, and what is going to be critical to watch out for in that is a lot of financial outlay also has been set out for this, with maybe also a lot of borrowing the government will have to do for this. What's going to be critical to look at is the monitoring of all of these schemes which have been set out and laid out over a longer period of time. So monitoring, management, and ensuring that the deliveries happen on all of the schemes, I think this is a critical part for me. And also because it's going to involve a large financial outlay, the timely and efficient disbursal and utilization of the funding. So the raising of the funding at the right time, the utilization of the funding in an efficient and appropriate manner, if this is done, and then the monitoring and management of all the schemes which are, all the outlay schemes which are there, I think if these are managed very well and in a nice manner, it indeed should have a very large impact on the country. And of course, collateral to that is all the other, the positive impact on the industries, on all the industries which are associated with infrastructure, all the construction industry, the steel, cement, and everything else that is associated with it, maybe employment as well. This is one thing which pops out. The second thing which noteworthy is the focus on agriculture and on the particularly on the Ken-Betwa link project, which is again for the which covers over 9 lakh crore hectares of farmland and the irrigation for all of these farmlands. I think that if it is achieved very well, then indeed agriculture and farming will be impacted very, very positively. For education, there is something which has been done with the one TV channel for one class to ensure that rural households and rural children in the rural areas will get the schooling provision for schooling under the COVID times. Housing, I think, is a very big one for me, with the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana with 80 lakh houses which have to be constructed, and then also the water provision, the Har Ghar Nal Se provision. So these are again very, very large financial outlays of 48,000 crores and 60,000 crores. But these are again schemes for the housing and for the water provision, which will have a very large impact for people, not only for the industry, but also for the people and for the communities and societies. Urban planning, which has come out to be a very big focus, where the government is looking at, because 50% of the population of the country is going to be residing in urban cities. So, but they have made a statement that they want the urban planning to be done in a very, very planned manner. So they will involve universities and institutions across the country. I think that there are something like 5 institutes they are going to engage. So in a very planned manner, development of cities, this should augur well for ease of living index for people. 5G spectrum rollout, of course, is a very big one, where also the government will make some money on because so much capex is slated to be done. So on the revenue side, revenue generation for the government with the 5G rollout should be good, and also the 5G rollout itself per se would be a very good thing for the country. Along with that, the collateral effects of this, whereby domestic industry will receive a fillip for manufacturing of the 5G components, that should have a very positive impact. I also agree that the SEZ Act, which is slated to change, and where the central government is going to push development of SEZ locations at a state level. I think this will have a very big impact, because there is so much of industrial infrastructure which already exists at state levels. So schemes for that, and there is an outlay of 1 lakh crore rupees for that. This should help to develop existing infrastructure in a better way and receive a boost for the industry. Apart from that, I think for the new manufacturing units, the scheme which has been extended, and then for startups, the scheme which has been extended, I think that's a good one. So these are the positive things which came up for me from the budget.
So, thank you, Priyamada madam. Now, let me hear the consultant, Amit Gandhi. And sir, Amitji, the question to you, I'm just putting a question to you because everybody has spoken. So the question which arises is that the chemical sector, if you see, it historically has grown at 1.25 to 1.5 of the overall GDP of the country. The current GDP of FY, this fiscal, we are looking at a 9%. So there is an expectation that the chemical industry will go at 12 to 14%. The next, which is FY23, we are looking at 8 to 8.5. So we will definitely look at 10 to 12%. So keeping that's one parameter which I thought of bringing it in front of you. The second parameter is export is doing pretty well for us, but domestic demand has to a certain extent gone down. And this we have also seen in the agrochemical sector because of the untimely rains that we have received. So this is quite a bit disappointing. So with these two, and then the third thing is that we haven't heard anything related to the export part, which is the road tap scheme or any other scheme to boost exports, because this is one sector which will give, which will have an impact on overall exports for the country. So keeping these three parameters that I talked about, I wanted to hear your views. So can we reach the $300 billion landmark that we have chosen for ourselves? So over to Amit Khan.
Thanks, Praveen. And it was a pleasure to hear all the co-panelists on the different aspects. And it's very interesting how everyone looks at the budget a bit differently. And it's great that we have different perspectives here. I wanted to bring a separate perspective in as we are analyzing the budget. I always find it useful to start with saying, what are we optimizing for as a country? What do we really want to achieve? We are the 6th largest chemicals producer worldwide. We've had a great run over the last 12 to 18 months across most subsectors within chemicals, even adjusting for the input prices and the supply chain challenges for exports. There is clearly a significant opportunity. I mean, some of the estimates that I had done with the Indian Chemical Council was saying, if we do everything right, there's a $300 billion plus opportunity staring us in the face, along with the trade surplus, which is an important part of this, which we are right now at trade deficit here. To achieve that, if I was to be very simplistic, there are three big things which we require. And let's talk about what the budget has allowed us to do in that and what are we looking for beyond the budget to deliver. The first one is we need significant incentives to drive capital investments. There's a large capital outlay which is required to deliver this if we're going to do a lot of manufacturing in India. What are the positives? The 31st March 2024 deadline is certainly a positive for new manufacturing investment in India, particularly as we look at it as from a chemicals point of view. A lot of new incentives downstream in some of the specialty chemicals will be because of JVs, partnerships or technical partnerships with global firms. If the incentive works well, the economics of setting up a new facility are actually quite good and thus can really spur the investment and ensure that the 1 year we lost in between because of the pandemic can be made up. So I see that as a big positive on our overall vision of partnering with global firms to get technology in and creating investments and solving a downstream problem here. What am I looking for more? Of course, the whole PLI scheme we've discussed multiple times here on key intermediates, not for everything, and for some specialty chemicals. I'm really looking for that more to come over the year, hopefully, or some discussion around that. As well as we need to look at condo crackers working with downstream ecosystems a lot better. And if any incentives can help in that direction, obviously we're looking for that in addition to the manufacturing side. So the first one is incentives on the manufacturing ecosystem to deliver. The second one is purely on innovation and research, where it is too specific maybe for the union budget, but I'm looking for it a lot more from the chemicals overall policy point of view. Can we look at three things? Can we fund dedicated chemical research centers and truly fund them with both industry and government coming together? Can we get fiscal support for first in India a lot stronger? And can we look at what can drive digital faster from a chemicals manufacturing point of view by investing in it as an industry? For example, a bunch of countries worldwide have actually done an industry level investment on digital. So that would be my second ask and for hitting the $300 billion number, where we're looking for it more beyond the union budget. The third one is on supply chain streamlining. The focus on logistics is very strong in this time's union budget, which is very welcome. That's clearly something which it's a rising tide which rises all boats. We will also benefit significantly as a chemical sector here. I want to add two things to it. We need a digitized central chemicals repository, and we need a reach-like unified approach to chemicals. If we add those two with the overall logistics streamlining, then we actually have a sector which can actually deliver significantly higher volumes outside. So that's the three parts I would look at as important for $300 billion. And this is where we believe the union budget is delivered and where we are looking for beyond the union budget here.
So we have come to the end of the first round, and so I would request all my delegates to keep on typing their questions on the Q&A window rather than on the chat window. I see 5 questions there already. Coming to the second track, we are at around 15:58, so we have another 20 minutes, and then we can take up the Q&A. So I start with Amit once again. So, sir, coming back to what Om Hisaria ji talked about, 8 lakh investment, and you also talked that capital investments would be significant. So, do you see we reaching that number over a period of time, or there are some fine tuning which needs to be done as we move ahead? There are another 2 budgets which are there to come.
Yeah. As I mentioned, the positive is the extension of the deadline on investment incentives for new manufacturing capex and new companies starting up manufacturing. I think that's an incredible positive because a lot of the capex will be coming in by some version of a partnership with technical or large scale global companies, whether that's FDI, whether that's a take or pay arrangement, whichever way it is. But basically that was actually going to be a big fillip, and that is really helpful. It was a big ask by the industry, and the budget delivered on that. I think over the next 2 budgets or over the next 3 years, the whole aspect around PLI or some version of the incentive and the condo cracker part, I think those 2 we will have to solve for if we're going to achieve this. I don't think by itself we're going to achieve this year. We will need to solve one of these 2 in addition, which I'm sure is under discussion both at the industry level and the government level. One of the things that we have realized over time is a bunch of this stuff actually has to be done by the industry themselves. It's actually a lot of the push over the last 12 to 18 months has been industry driven from innovation and partnerships. I'm sure with all the entrepreneurial spirit we have on this panel and in the industry, there is a chance of achieving that. But I would say these 2, if we get, it's a big fillip.
And on the cracker part, do you see things moving in the right direction? Because that's a huge investment we require, and the PCPI policy is still not being in place. Will that act as a deterrent? Amit?
The way I look at it is actually it's not about the PCPI policy or not, because I know there's been a lot of debate around that. The way I look at it is, can we convince 2 or 3 anchor investors to come in and do that? And that will again require a joint industry government partnership to make it happen. It's not one agency or the other to do this here. It'll require a bunch of downstream industry players to come together, work with the government, and figure out which is the big anchor investor will come in and put in an investment on the condo cracker side. So I think that is possible. Nothing in the budget excludes that or precludes it. We just ensure that we keep our focus as the industry and as the government on getting that part sorted out and driving towards some anchor investors.
Thank you, Amitji. Now I come to Ma'am Priyamvada Bhumkarji. Ma'am, how do you look at your sector, which is the colorant manufacturing and research, and you also export a lot of materials. So how do you look at your sector, and how will this budget help you in terms of increasing revenue and profitability for your company as well as for the sector? If you can unmute yourself, ma'am.
So primarily, we are addressing coloring needs of different industries for the paint and coatings industry and some other like agrochemicals industry and other coloration of printing inks, etc. So I think that some of the things, particularly the focus on the infrastructure development, on the housing yojanas and all that, there is going to be a lot of construction which is going to happen. This will definitely positively impact the paint and the coatings industry. Also, we have seen the PLI scheme for the solar cell manufacturing. So with a thrust on solar, again, there is a lot of coating which goes on to the solar cells. So definitely this is a positive for the coatings industry. I would think that in terms of the customs duty provisions which have come, some of the customs duty will be phased out on almost 1400 chemicals. I think on almost 350 different exemptions are going to be removed during the year. So we have to wait and see which are these exemptions which are going to go. But definitely the customs duty tariff, which has come of 7.5% on capital goods and on project imports, this will impact the project costing and on plant and equipment costing for chemical plants. Apart from that, I feel that chemicals exports is a very, very big area which can be very good for our country, particularly given the fact that what is happening in China, and there is a huge opportunity in chemicals exports for India. I would have liked to see something more for export incentivizing, whereas the budget has remained more or less silent on this. Hopefully, if something good comes in during the year for incentivizing exports. For instance, our company, 30% of our revenue itself comes from exports, and we have global presence in 50 countries. Our exports are going to, but something which would have been there to support that would be great. We are looking at approximately 50% of our revenues over the next 2 years coming in from exports. So something for exports would have been really great to see. So these are the general impacts for our industry.
Thank you, ma'am. I come to Kaushalji. Sir, you represent the chlor-alkali segment. So I was looking at the chlor-alkali segment and how the ports and logistics will help you going forward.
See, Praveen bhai, I always say the chlor-alkali industry is actually a chemical logistic industry. So more we enhance the logistic, or more we bring the solution of the logistics industry for the industry, is going to benefit fast to the customer. Ultimately, the basic chemical, it's used by all the companies, and whether during the process or after the process or in environment. So definitely enhancement of port or road infra is going to help in a big way. Most of the chlor-alkali plants are based on the coal-based power plant, and we are practically importing coal. So closer to the port, it always helps us to bring down the cost of the material. At the same time, many of the chlor-alkali industry are in downstream of like chloromethanes, which we are, and reduction in duty of methanol will help ultimately in producing a lower chloromethanes cost that will pass on to the customer ultimately. So as we said in the beginning, the lower logistic cost is always going to help to the end customer. And because that was the higher cost is just going to someone else's pocket, which was not required. And it will bring overall efficiency in our operation. And that is the best way I would say. Like, if you can look at the GST, right? I'm just sliding away from your question, but it is connected to this answer. Is that before GST, we know how many taxes were there. And you feel at one point, should I become a chartered accountant? Should I become an engineer? Because I don't know what I should do. But today, because of GST, things are so simplified, and you can see the record number of in January, which finance minister announced in the budget. So the simplified logistic will help ultimately to run our operation more smoothly, and we can focus on our core area. Our area is to produce, manufacture, not look at the logistic problems, and that's what we want to do. at the end of the day. So this is a great thing, great announcements, and we hope that it will translate very quick into the action.
Thank you, Kaushalji. Pankajji, you represent specialty and pharmaceutical sector. We were all banking on sorry, PLI for specialty, but that not happening. How do you see this sector from whatever announcements that have been made? Over to Pankaj.
Yeah, thank you again, Praveen. Yes, I think the intermediate sector really doesn't have had the direct any policy impacting it directly, but as it goes into all, while agrochemicals and pharmaceuticals are our major end markets, there's dyes and pigments, colorants, and plastics, additives, and there are many sub-segments, some of which will definitely benefit from the general infrastructure and investment push that the government has, but not directly. I think I'll second some of the comments that we really would have liked to have the PLI. In my earlier comments also, I mentioned that was sorely missed. We had worked very hard to make proposals for the government to put up PLIs for really chemicals of great interest for the economy, and also for the exports. 40% of our production is exported, and another 20% is indirect export through our customers who then export their onward products. So again, benefits on exports, like you mentioned about road tap or increased duty drawback or some other would be definitely helpful. And also, we are looking at a huge capital investment coming up. Like our company is planning to have a 4,500 to 5,000 crore investment in the next 3 years, and with the increase in the capital goods duty rates, that's not very encouraging. But again, that's a small portion of our capital expenditure, so its overall impact is less, but still every bit counts in our profitability. So yes, it's a mixed bag.
Thank you, Pankajji. Now I come to Deepak Shahji. Sir, wanted to know from you the agrochemical sector, and there are two important announcements which were made. One was with respect to chemical-free natural farming, which they are planning to do on a pilot basis on a 5-kilometer corridor along River Ganga. And the second is the Kisan drone, where they're talking about DRASH, drone as a service, for, say, spraying of insecticides, nutrients, and then crop assessment as such. So how do you see these two initiatives? And apart from that, the other initiatives which were announced in the budget from an agrochemical perspective, sir?
Thank you, Prashantji. I'll take the second one first, that is the Kisan drone. Yes, the drone for crop protection or nutrient spraying or crop protection sprays, or even for crop assessments, it's a very welcome move. As our company has been also for last 2 years have been doing trials on the same. These farmers will benefit immensely, number one. Number two, cost of spraying will go down. Number three, safety to the farmer for spraying. So that covers your Kisan drone part of the thing. Let me, before I come to the chemical free natural farming, I want to add that I think this point was not covered by possibly anyone, if I remember correctly. In the budget announcement, they said that 1.5 lakh post offices, which is an existing infrastructure. It's a resource which is already there to be converted to core banking. And this will definitely, there will be financial inclusion of the people who are not having close by access to the banks. It will also allow them an easy access to accounts, to online transfers, and the farmers and the rural citizens will be greatly benefited. The railways, somebody covered the railways, but railways will develop new products and efficient logistics services for small farmers and MSME industries, which will benefit. So this covers the positive part. I would little bit cover, I don't want to say negative part, but something which the government could have done possibly better. I know they can't do everything, but these are some of the things of the hour. We are an R&D based company. Today we have 375 patents. How has it come? It has come after a real work done on R&D. And we had a benefit of claiming 200%, what they were calling spending allowance or whatever, we were claiming as an expense, which has been withdrawn, which should have possibly done that. Priyam Balaji took the point of exports. Look at the exports of a little cheaper commodities that must have been affected because of the freight. Of course, I've been following up with the ministry and all that, had personal meetings on behalf of our associations and so on. Unfortunately, nothing could happen. But the freight rates for products which are cheap, like $1 a kilo, we export something like 15,000 tons. Out of our total turnover, more than 50% is exports. Now, if the freights have gone up by 100 to 500%, okay, now my main exports are to Europe and US and Brazil. Now the freight rates are so much that it's okay. We can pass through 1 or 2 years like that, but this was one of the something could have been done in it. The budget allocation for agriculture is from 1.18 lakh crore to 1.23, hardly any increase. And no PLI, again, somebody has already covered, Pankaj Mehta ji and maybe others have covered that no PLI for, but it's coming, that's what I understand. I mean, let's hope. And the road tax, that also has been covered. I feel even a MEIS of, which is, we are at least having it till March 31st, 2022, of few percent, 2% and 2.5% and whatever, I think it's not sufficient to encourage exports. Now coming to your last point, that chemical-free farming along the Ganga River, whatever, the 5 kilometers or whatever the numbers they've given. I think it's a good try. Our experience shows that chemical-free natural farming, you may not use chemicals, but you will have to use something else. These are under developments at various levels by various industries. You may want to call it biological, you may want to call it natural products. There are many names that are given. But I feel that's at least 3 years away, if not more. But I think there is no harm in trying. And 5 kilometers, if you try few acres here, few acres there, and in 10 states, you may still, this is a good trial. And I feel it is partly more to keep people happy that we are doing some organic farming and chemical-free farming. That's all, Prashant.
Thank you, sir. I think you have given a very honest reply. I'm thankful to you, sir. We have another two before we take up the questions, and I would request all my delegates to keep typing in their questions so that we can take it up. I would request Sohab, sir, if you can talk about the basic chemical and the specialty chemical, plus your subsidiary or your other company, Rallis, which focuses on agrochemical. So, sir, how do you see this, the sector-wise, as well as the digital multimodal connectivity, because these are bulk supplies, which will definitely help you in the long run. So your views, sir, on these 2 points.
Thanks, Prashant. It's a bulk chemicals and lot of logistics and logistics cost involved. I think Mr. Soparkar also talked about logistics for caustic, but similarly for soda ash also, caustic and soda, lot of logistics and cost is impacting. And the way I see the linking of 5 rivers and slowly starting to make waterways, that is significantly supporting the European continent. If you see, there are a lot of, and including in China, a lot of waterways movement happens for bulk chemicals. That is one. And if you look at also 25,000 kilometers of expressway, which we talk about. So I remember about 10 years back, some of the logistics destination used to get covered in 8 days. Today, we are doing it about 4 days. And if these things improve, so what will happen? That it will improve the cost efficiency of all these chemicals, including soda ash. And at the same time, it will give a lot of predictability to customers. So if you say the pipeline stocks, accumulation of material in pipelines will start reducing. So overall industry efficiency for the suppliers and for customers both will reduce. So it is very important. I don't expect the lever linkages to get completed, but at least a good movement has happened there. Apart from that, if you see the connectivity, digital connectivity, which we are talking about, multimodal, and today there are, whether you call about predictability, whether you call about smooth transactions and system movement, and also whether if it gets delayed, then additional cost of what do you call damage, etc. So once we have this multimodal connectivity, digital connectivity, it will significantly improve, along with, if we do this along with blockchains and all that, significantly improve the documentation flow and service levels and cost. It will impact all of them. And lastly, I covered in my discussion about soda ash with solar focus on solar power. It is definitely going to increase soda ash consumption because it's glass, and glass is second largest consuming sector for soda ash. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Rupak, sir. So if you can talk about the green, you are anyway a green petrochemical company, and you are heading the green and the sustainability from a chemical point of view. So your views on that, and if you can also sum it up so that then I can take up the questions after your.
Right. The way we kind of see it is more like bio-based ingredients and performance chemicals as ideal. It is historically, yes, we started by manufacturing glycols to the molasses route. We were the first one in the world, and even now we are probably the one out of the 2 and the largest. Yes. So I think there are a few things about this budget when it comes specifically to look at the chemical industry and the approach of the government, which I might like to comment on. A number of specifics have been very well addressed by my fellow panelists. I think the one thing which is very clear is that the government is very serious about the green economy. And it should be serious, and it's very good to see in one way that it is very serious. I think it will create a lot of opportunities, be it through biofuels, which is ethanol, be it through green power. And I think the reason green power is very important is that India will become one of the largest producers of green hydrogen, and therefore a whole host of molecules going forward. And hopefully in a few years, we will be getting a lot of chemicals from the cellulosic feedstocks, which is basically straw and a lot of farm waste, which is in many ways great for India. India is one of the biggest farm economies. I think that's very important. But I think the challenges of that need to be addressed as well. While I say all that, we also recognize that rice and sugarcane, which are the prime grains which are being used for biofuels, are actually consuming 70+% of our irrigation water. We already have a challenge of the water table. Similarly, if you go for EVs, I don't see enough work being done in terms of putting the recycling infrastructure in place, because if you don't do that, it's going to be an even bigger failure. first of all, we are dependent on nickel, cadmium, cobalt from outside. Second thing is, if these metals are not recovered, they are a disaster. So I think that bit in terms of connecting is very important, which is I don't see enough of it being done. From our industry perspective, I think if the country does well, and you've talked about so many sectors, and if we see that kind of growth, the earning capacity of people is going to go up. In terms of ourselves or a joint venture with Clariant, I'm sure we'll continue to see growth in terms of products that go into personal care, for example, products that go into coatings, products that go into the pharma industry, into the textiles industry, into the crop care industry, into the construction industry. That is going to happen. A few things that have been raised here, and I think they are very pertinent, and I do not know, I often feel that we as an industry have not worked together enough to create a winning ecosystem. And that's not only for us, and India, you would see, has largely been a bottom-up economy. You start with IT, bottom-up economy. You start with crop care, or the crop protection industry is largely a bottom-up economy. Pharma, a bottom-up economy. And as far as the government is concerned, I think in their mind, chemical needs to occupy a much larger space and their policy for a few reasons. One is that it is the building block industry for every other industry. The second is that there is tremendous scope for India to do value addition. You can't, you may wish away chemicals. What people do not realize, sometimes there's an image of the chemical industry that it is bad, but I may like to tell you that 70% of the most toxic waste actually comes from the electronics industry. So the chemical somehow has a bad name and it doesn't get enough attention. The chemical industry for the government has largely been petrochemicals and fertilizers. And that mindset of 30 years ago needs to change to see how we can do much more in terms of value addition. I said, one is this tremendous scope to add value. Second thing is it's a building block for all the other industries that you're talking about. And I think it's fundamental to creating a green economy, whether it is in terms of the products, the processes, the circular economy that we do not see enough happening there. Like we are talking about power sector reforms, of course they are required. I think we need a similar kind of language that needs to go into looking at what we will do with our chemical industry. That has not happened. And it's a little disappointing. I think those points have been raised by fellow panelists, but I can repeat. We have to move away from petrochemicals, fertilizers, and setting up a karkhana. I'm sure a lot of industry is doing by itself, but I think we need a major focus on driving R&D and innovation. It's no more about taking some product which DuPont used to make 10 years ago. We will make it now and sell it at lower gross margins. Look at what is happening even in countries like Germany, UK. We thought they are sunset as far as manufacturing is concerned, but the amount of focus, the Center for Process Industry in the UK, etc. We need to do something like that, and we don't see that happening. And somebody talked about exports, and this has been going on for a while. Where your freight rates have gone up from 2 to 5 times, as Mr. Shah said, and it's not only a small disadvantage; it's completely destroying the ability to build a business for some businesses. And everybody has been talking about it, but I think the policymakers need to think about some intervention in their own way, because I don't know what the freight industry is up to, and it's certainly not healthy. And the last is that we've not done, as I said, we need to, I don't know whether we need to request Piyush Goyal to come here or whatever. We need a much systematic look at how we are going to build the infrastructure. Our PCPI program is really not something good, to show about. I talked about the Jurong Island thing, and the reason I talked about it is that it amazes me that India fundamentally is in a far stronger position to create many Jurong Islands, and I'll tell you why. If you look at the capex costs, for example, if you're going to invest in Singapore, it's going to cost you 2 to 3 times higher for the same plant. If you look at people, and I've interacted with people all across Southeast Asia, they've been part of my teams, I've across the world. I can tell you, whilst we may not have all people who are world class, but there is such a good number of people who are such good talent. Our R&D people, our technical people, we can get the best of class. We've got huge amount of feedstocks in this country. We've got a ready market in this country. The world is really talking about China plus one. And sometimes, whilst I was very optimistic in my opening comments about the budget, we feel that we shouldn't, and the reason I'm emphasizing this is that we should not allow this to be another missed opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity to add value. It's a great opportunity to take India forward. It's a great opportunity for India to deliver sustainable models, not only to the India but to the world as well. I think the world looks at India, but somehow we've not been able to do enough to come up to those expectations. And I think that is where I feel we need a significant policy thrust as well.
Thank you, Rupak. I missed Om Hisaria ji. So I request him, sir, are you there? Om Hisaria ji?
Yes, I'm very much.
Yeah, so with respect to petrochemical, with respect to blending of fuel, ₹2, if you are not blending it, then energy transition and climate change. So your views, sir, from the industry perspective, and then we take up the questions for the next 15 minutes, if that's okay with everybody.
Blending of fuels is a reality. 5% blending, now it's 12% and 15%. In fact, increasingly the industry, I mean, at a policy level, yes, there is enough push for blending of fuels, especially ethanol blending. The challenge with the refining industry is to find enough and reliable supply of ethanol in the short term, which the supply lanes and supply channels are being established more and more. As Rupak ji was saying, there would be more cellulosic, perhaps fuels, which, I mean, blend stock, which will be used in this in more and more. Apart from blending, you also might have, I mean, everybody might have noticed that use of biomass in the traditional power plants, thermal power plants, use of biomass, that limits, I mean, they have already made mandatory up to a certain extent. Those limits are getting increased. So that again will have a positive impact in the green economy. Then there are proposals which will make use of green hydrogen mandatory for the refining sector and for the fertilizer sector. There is already a concept paper which has been floated by Niti Aayog. That would be another multiplier in this, I mean, one can say, for this green economy. So there have been, I mean, then there is this infrastructure relating to, in urban areas, especially the swapping of battery infrastructure. Our subsidiary is already doing this swapping of batteries for EVs in certain geographies at the moment. There are a number of tax and other regulatory challenges in implementing those. So this focus which the budget has provided for a policy on swapping of batteries for EVs, that also should help. So overall, I mean, for the petrochemical industry and the refining sector, the direction is very, very clear. It's only that enablement over next few years in the medium term that would decide the fate, how far or how near we are to the targets that has been undertaken under COP26.
And one additional question, sir. There was a announcement that conversion of coal into chemical, and they are planning for a technical and financial viability. So how do you look at that new area which the government is working on?
Actually, I won't be able to comment much on that coal to chemical because we as an organization are not into it. We are still, I mean, O2C and getting into green hydrogen, green energy. So I'm sorry, I would not be able to comment on that initiative of coal to chemicals at the moment.
And it is said that for 5 to 7% of biomass pellets will be used in thermal plants.
Yes. So that is, in fact, the captive power plants, they have already made it mandatory. We have already started using in our captive power plants. So that would definitely help in cutting coal consumption.
And one thing, sir, which we missed was MSME. So how do you look at the overall MSME in this whole sector of chemical and petrochemical?
You see, MSME, again, I mean, as a window, they have created a number of initiatives, especially ease of doing business, providing liquidity support. So those two things are definitely there, but there is no specific niche created for the chemical industry. That perhaps Madam Priyambada also mentioned that perhaps a focus on chemicals, because the areas which are being vacated now by China, a big part of it is in chemicals. And our chemical industry is MSME intensive. So perhaps that focus, of course, MSME has been a focus of the government, but within that focus, a niche or a sharper focus on chemical sector MSME has been one point which perhaps would have added more edge or expectations from the budget to our sector.
Thank you, Om Isaria ji. Now let me open it up for Q&A for another 15 minutes. We have, the first is Mr. Ankit Gandhi. What would be the outlook of EV in terms of setting up of infrastructure to kickstart the EV economy? And his another question is, by what percentage of CAGR chemical industry will grow to 2030, which I already have answered when I asked this question to Amit Gandhi. It is 1.25 to 1.5% of the GDP. So whatever the GDP, the chemical industry, this is a ballpark figure that we would be growing at around 1.25 to 1.5%. So who would like to take the EV part? Sir, Om Isaria ji, will you like to take, because you are working in a big way on the EV solution?
Yes, it's not just us, even the PSU oil companies. I mean, they are very active in creating the infrastructure for recharge of these EV, electric vehicles. So the first thing, at the moment, the manufacturing of EVs, especially four-wheelers or the goods transport vehicles, that of course in India will take some time. Two-wheeler EVs, yes, we may be on way to have domestically produced EVs in two-wheelers. That is fine. And this recharge infrastructure, that quite a big way, almost all the oil companies have been investing, including some of the vehicle manufacturers who are also creating these charging infrastructure, which will be crucial for spread of this EVs in the economy. So at the moment, it seems the growth path looks haphazard. We can't see a direction at the moment. A number of policy initiatives have been launched and they are working in their silos. Perhaps another 2 years would see a clear direction where the EV economies is headed to.
Thank you, sir. S. Venuji is talking about, Pankaj, your views, sir.
Praveenji, thank you for this opportunity, but I have another meeting to switch over to. So if you'll excuse me.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Why don't you take one question and then you move on? There is a question from Ramaswamy Vishwanathan. And what would be the impact of methanol coming from carbon capture efforts of NTPC plants and possibly rest burning coal to follow on the reduced import duty of methanol?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. In general, methanol manufacturing in India is not competitive because most of the methanol in the world gets made in what's called stranded gas locations, where the gas does not have a good option for use and it can't be transported too long. So it's better to convert it to methanol so that the raw material cost for that methanol is very low. Of course, in India, we don't have that kind of stranded gas. And and of course, we have a lot of imports of methanol. What I would expect is that once we have substantial production of methanol, maybe the government can look at how to change the customs duty at that time. But at the time when we have significant imports, mostly imported methanol, this lowering is a proper thing to do for the economy. Maybe some specific incentives or support for stranded methanol or carbon capture methanol, that would be separately required. But as such, otherwise it would of course not be very competitive.
Thank you, Pankaj, for your views.
Thank you.
And we have a question from Mr. Ramaswamy Vishwanathan. No IT weighted reductions for R&D in industry. Let me say that for government contribution in R&D, there is one thing where they have said that academia, industry, public, where government will contribute will be provided. And the sectors which they have announced is geospatial system and roads, genomics, pharmaceuticals, green energy, and clean mobility. Sir, Rupakji, your views on this?
So can you just once again repeat the question? It was a one-line question. Is it about
He says no IT, no IT. So what he's saying, no incentive for R&D for the chemical industry.
No, I think several people talked about it. That is a concern in two ways. One is that naturally innovation has not become a part of our ecosystem. Companies don't do it. Our technology institutes hardly do it, except for a little bit of application development. And the government has not done enough to make that a significant part of our value creation exercise. And if you look at right across Indian companies, the amount of money spent on innovation and R&D is very less. Going forward, it is extremely important for the policymakers to give that a thrust. Now that can come, one of the ways to give it a thrust is to allow concessions or IT benefits in terms of IT, but there are many other ways in which the government really needs to think about driving innovation, which includes our academic institutes, which produce so many PhDs, which are more aligned to creating real value addition. I think there is a big gap there. Who need to work on live projects for the industry? How many of our educational institutions having hundreds and thousands of PhDs are doing live useful projects for the industry? They can be small projects, but I think that connect is missing as well. So that's something else that the policymakers can be driving much more, which will also cost effectively allow us to fund projects in our academic institutes. I have only that much to say. People have said about that.
Well, thank you, sir. There is two questions. One is related to PLI from an anonymous attendee. I think we have diverged a lot on the PLI scheme. And the question is, PLI scheme was initiated some time back. We are yet to see the tangible output. Do you see opportunities for improvement in PLI scheme? And the second is from S. Venuji is export incentives have been reduced. Government should find a way to increase this. So Sohabji, will you take this up in brief with respect to export incentives?
Export incentives, many people talked about it. Definitely industry would look for export incentives. And on PLI scheme, I think it's not end of the road. People have made representations to various ministries and Department of Commerce, Commerce Ministry, Chemical Ministry. They have been asking for various data points and various suggestions for PLI, and industry has given those inputs. And I think even Mr. Deepak Shah talked about giving those inputs to the industry. So I feel that it is still open, and it's possible that more PLI schemes will be announced during the year. Maybe they have not been announced, some of them in this budget, but it might come through.
Then there is a question. Thank you, sir. There is a question from Kishore Majumdar. What's your impression on Green Hydrogen Initiative boost in the Union Budget 2022? As whatever that I have read, there is no talk about green hydrogen, but if somebody wants to add.
A couple of points I would want to add. About 10-15 days back, the first commercial hydrogen tanker has moved from Australia. That is the first commercial hydrogen, and that is also not green. So what we are expecting, possibly that green hydrogen at commercial scale is still about 9 to 10 years away from today. It's still at a stage where concepts and research is being done.
And there is another, sir. GAIL has started blending of hydrogen. So that's we carried that news on our website a few days back. So presently, but there is no mention about green hydrogen. The green hydrogen initiatives are moving forward, and we are seeing the steel industry, the POSCO and Adani coming out with the green industry, with the steel industry, which they will focus on green hydrogen in a big way. That was an announcement which was made recently, and we are seeing a lot of things happening on the green hydrogen. And sir, Om Isaria ji, if you can talk about green hydrogen, you are also working in a very big way on that, sir.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier also, we are, I mean, it's on drawing boards at a very late stage. I mean, things would be moving to ground very soon for our green hydrogen project. Green hydrogen, use of green hydrogen as transport fuel. That, of course, will take some time before it fructifies and we see vehicles running on green hydrogen on roads. But use of green hydrogen in refinery sector, in fertilizers, and in steel plants. That's already a reality. And as I mentioned earlier also, Niti Aayog has already floated a paper which will make use of green hydrogen mandatory. I mean, you have to use so much of percent of your hydrogen in a refinery or in a fertilizer plant, which is green hydrogen, otherwise you pay penalty. So the government is pushing green hydrogen in a big way, but of course, use of green hydrogen in mobility solutions, that will perhaps take some more time.
Okay, thank you, sir. S. Venuji is talking about Make in India, especially chemical manufacturing. The investment is used, risk is used, affluent management is high, and there is competition from China. Hence, government has to provide cost-effective infrastructure and incentives for a long period till the industry is able to break. And I would request Priyambada madam if she can answer this, and also Deepak Shahji after Priyambada madam. Ma'am, if you can unmute yourself.
Can you kindly repeat the question?
Make in India, especially chemical manufacturing, the investment is used, the risk is used, affluent management is high, and there is a competition from China. Government has to provide cost-effective infrastructure, incentives for a long period till the industry is able to break even.
Yes, I think it is yes for everything. There is a lot of opportunity. Challenges are always there. And yes, incentives and support from the government side to compete with the scale at which China does things. I think it's about the scale, and also that the Chinese industry gets incentivized very highly by their government. And for India to compete, at a global level, and even within India itself as well, some kind of a support would be great to have that. There is a lot which can be done again, and it's a very intense subject and many aspects to it.
Deepak, thank you, ma'am. Okay.
Thank you, Prashantji. Industry definitely needs a lot of incentives. I recall the type of incentives the Chinese industries were offered, or even maybe currently being offered. We definitely need a lot of support from the government. We also want government to think on the same page, because within the government, some people say, I don't want chemicals to be manufactured more, or we are making, I don't know the exact word, we are dirtying the environment and so on. Another point is the land prices in India are very, very high. We understand the reason behind it also. We are 16 or 17% of the world's population with 3% of the land area that we have. So land is obviously very, very expensive. And the cost of the project as such sometimes is low, but the cost of the land makes it little high. The last point I would like to say, the economy of scale that China has put. We need a lot of support from government, even from the financial institutions, that if you need a 5,000 ton today, you need to plan for a 15,000 ton plant. You may suffer for initial 2, 3, 4 years, but eventually your economy of scale will bring your costs down. And the main point that I would still finally drive is if government incentivizes, whether it's PLI that's possibly coming, or export benefits, whether MEIS and or others, whatever, RODTEP, at least in our industry, is not working out. We calculated it's coming to some 0.75%. That is what the refund we will get. That also after so much of calculation of the excise on fuel and these and that and whatnot. I don't know the exact procedure of calculating, but that's what my people told me. So why not make systems easy and incentivize the industry? You see, people are looking at industry making money. They are looking at it in a very different way, in a sort of in a old time ways, communist ways, you know. Unless the industry doesn't make money, they will not invest further. They will not do R&D, and they will not be able to pay well.
Thank you, Deepak. One last question from Ajit Sir. Budget with focus on ESG, and I would request short answers from Sohab ji and Rupak ji.
Sorry, can you repeat, Praveen?
Budget with focus on ESG. ESG.
See, ESG, if you look at the green focus, which is currently there on environment, a lot of, I think, green energy conversion to solar power, also the RPO, which is already there, and also the biomass, which we are talking about, is very important that the entire environmental issues which companies are doing will get additional focus from the government side also. And as we move, there are those incentives coming on environment related issues, or it's both incentives also and penalties also, both are there. So it will keep growing as we move forward. On governance and social factors of the corporations, I think very specifically in this budget, there are, I have not seen very specific focus, but it's already there in corporations, and slowly it will keep moving, I think.
Thank you, sir. Rupak ji, your 60 seconds. And I need to do the concluding remark.
Okay, thank you. A few connected comments if I can make, and I'm a strong believer that in many ways, whilst we should look at China in terms of how they've executed their projects, how they've scaled up, but in many ways we need to decouple our thinking from China. China grew like China when it did 30 years ago. India will grow like India, and that's going to be different. It has to be different. And I'll tell you why I'm saying. In terms of, I think, the investment on pollution, etc., the fact of the matter is that in public opinion, and I support it by saying that 70% of the most toxic waste actually comes from the electronics industry, but the perception is bad of the chemicals industry. But I think we've collectively, government and ecosystem and industry put together, let's accept that we've done a lot of damage to our public perception, and some bad apples have definitely contributed to that. And whether we may like it or not, the court of public opinion is going to become stronger and stronger and stronger, and that's something that we need to work towards. If you look at throughout the world, investment in environment sustainability is not a cost. Had it been a cost, the greatest of ecosystems, the most profitable of ecosystems would not have been the most compliant ones. That is consistently the case. And that's one point. The other thing is that I think the government is doing the right thing. It's painful sometimes, but we don't have a choice in terms of putting ESG right on top of the agenda. And I'll tell you, as a human being, as a citizen, we often have no idea about the kind of damage we've done to the planet. And we are, the Secretary General of the United Nations said that we are losing the race, and we may soon be in a place of irreversible damage. He said it on record, and he's not an NGO, he's not, and for the last 18 years have been the hottest years ever on the planet. You may not know, and I'll surprise, it was very surprised, and I did my calculations looking at, sensible heat and all of that. The amount of heat our oceans are absorbing is roughly equivalent to 2 to 3 Hiroshima atomic bombs per second. We are facing a disaster. And that's why climate is on top of the agenda. It must be, because otherwise we'll have tremendous damage to our industry. Let me give you an example of China. I'm not absolutely precise on my numbers, but broadly this is what it says. In most parts of China, 80% of groundwater is not fit, not to drink, not to touch. And you can change your fresh water, you can do something about your lakes, you can do something about your rivers. It's very difficult to do something about groundwater. It is under layers and layers of rock. So I think the challenge is very serious. In terms of sustainability, the world continues to destroy forests, which is equivalent to roughly about 100 football fields per minute. So I think that crisis is very real. And therefore, I strongly believe that as citizens, our opportunities will also lie in solving the world's problems. And therefore, sustainability is not only a necessity, but I think in my view, it's the greatest opportunity for India, because we've not gone down the China wave that long. And secondly, sustainability is very much in the ethos of this country. I think we should really aspire to deliver sustainable model to the world. The world will lap it up. I think it's a great opportunity. So the ESG focus is real. And as we become part of the larger world, and as we seek to drive and derive value not only from our markets in India but worldwide, I think it's extremely important that you build that level of trust. I've been talking to some investment bankers, some private equity people in different contexts. I think they are very, very wary of the industry in terms of trustability of the Indian industry, and therefore we fail to build strong, lasting partnerships. I have nothing more to say. I think ESG is sometimes a little painful, but I think it's the right thing to drive in the right way. One thing which I would say for the industry, and we should enable it, that from a regulator's perspective, and we talk about people who manage the pollution control boards and so on, we have to move away from the colonial policing model to facilitating, to working with the industry to find the next generation solutions, connecting the dots, putting the industrial ecosystem together. That certainly doesn't happen. And I think that is where policy interventions can be very useful. Sorry, Praveen, I've taken longer than the 60 seconds.
Thank you, Rupak ji. And with this, with ESG into background and sustainability into background, we come to the end of this panel discussion on Demystifying Union Budget 2022-23. And we have tried to answer majority of them. Some of the questions we have not taken up because they were answered during the panel discussion itself. I would like to thank all my esteemed speakers for their valuable insight and time during the course of the e-conference. Mr. Sohab Reyes, Chief Operating Officer, Indian Chemical Business, Tata Chemicals Limited. Mr. Rupak Saraswat, CEO, India Glycols Limited. Mr. Om Isalia, Senior Vice President, Reliance Industries Limited. Mr. Deepak Shah, CMD Sulphur Mills Limited. Mr. Pankaj Mehta, Joint President, Corporate Relations and Strategy, Aarti Industries Limited. Mr. Kaushal Soparkar, Managing Director, Make Money Fine Chem Limited. Mr. Ankit Patel, Executive Director, Bodil Chemicals. He was not able to join because of some emergency. Ms. Priyambada Bhumkar, Managing Director, Saujanya Color Private Limited. Mr. Amit Gandhi, Managing Director and Partner, Boston Consulting Group. I would a big thanks from the ICN team to all our speakers to take time out, explain things to all our delegates. Now I would request all my delegates, if they can rank this e-conference on a scale of 1 to 5. I see some comments already there from Pushpendra Kumar. It was a really nice discussion. So I would request them to rank us, 1 being the lowest and 5 being highest in the chat window. So please do our marking on where we stand. So I see 5 is the one that we all are getting. Thanks to all of us who have made this and made this session an interesting one. I would like to thank all my delegates for their active participation. For those delegates who registered but could not participate, can listen to the recorded version on our Indian Chemical News website. So thanking you once again on behalf of all ICN team members. This is Praveen Prashant signing off. To meet you again, we will inform you about our next panel sessions on the next e-conference. Till then, take care and stay safe, and namaste from Delhi from my side.